At this point, we'll go ahead for the environmental review. I'm going to turn it over to Tim Morgan of ESA, and he's going to provide a more detailed overview of the CEQA process and the mitigated negative declaration.
Thank you. So I'm Tim Morgan. I'm an environmental project manager with ESA. I have a degree in meteorology. I've been in environmental consulting for 36 years. Over the past 11 years, I've conducted CEQA review of projects in all 5 Bay Area refineries. I'd also note that ESA has been supporting the city of Benicia for the past 11 years on CEQA review with projects related to the Valero refinery. And that includes mitigation monitoring of projects as well. So a little about CEQA here. Because this project was estimated to cost more than $20 million, under city rules, discretionary review was required, and that in turn triggered CEQA review. The CEQA review could have followed one of 2 possible tracks, either a categorical exemption, which would have been an administrative process, and it clearly did not meet that, and thus we could also go the route of an initial study. An initial study provides the basis for determining whether a negative declaration or an environmental impact report should be prepared. It does that by identifying potentially significant environmental effects in a study and identifying potential mitigations. The CEQA guidelines say that initial study relies on expert opinion supported by facts, technical documents, and/or substantial evidence, but does not include the level of detail included in an EIR. That's a quote right out of CEQA. If the initial study shows that the project would not have any effect on the environment, a negative declaration may be prepared. If the initial study shows potentially significant impacts that can be mitigated to less than significant, a mitigated negative declaration may be prepared. If potential significant impacts remain, if the applicant does not agree to those mitigations suggested, or if there's substantial evidence in the record to support a fair argument that the project may have significant environmental effects, an EIR may need to be prepared. That's CEQA on the review process. So a little summary of the initial study mitigated negative declaration that we prepared. We began starting with project plans and data and technical studies provided by Valero, which we peer-reviewed and requested additional information from Valero, including publicly available data as well. The initial study then conducted a CEQA checklist review of 18 environmental criteria areas. For this project, we analyzed, it consisted of the construction operation of new rail facilities, and as Amy has indicated, the changing of service of an existing tank. These physical changes are also due of how crude would be received at the refinery, marine vessel versus rail, and the continued operation of the refinery at its current processing levels, continuing to meet its emission and effluent discharge requirements. So the initial study found potentially significant impacts for the following criteria: air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, geology and soils, hydrology and water quality, and transportation and traffic. Mitigation measures were identified that would reduce these impacts to less than significant. All other criteria areas were found to have either less than significant impacts or no impacts at all, requiring no mitigation. So a little more detail on what those impacts were. In the air quality area, the operational emissions were found to be within compliance of both the Bay Area Air Quality Management District levels of significance as well as permit limits. We did find that emissions from construction activities would be potentially significant and required the application of standard Bay Area Air Quality District mitigation measures to control those emissions. In the area of biological resources, our impacts, we found while there were no direct biological resource impacts on the project area, the area along the eastern edge of the refinery, which is known as Sulphur Springs Creek, is an area where nesting birds could be present between February and August. And with the construction cycle of this lasting 25 weeks, it would be possible that the nesting birds could be impacted by noise, light, and glare from the project construction. A mitigation measure was proposed to help to mitigate that if the construction flows into that period, or if they identify nesting bird pairs. Cultural resource impacts, again, there were no directly identified cultural resource impacts, but the site does have the presence of cultural resources, and paleontological resources are possible. And even though the site is highly disturbed, in the unlikely operation that during construction things would be uncovered, mitigation measures were proposed to address proper handling of those resources. For geology and soils, the project would be required to meet the California Building Code standards, and that should cover most of it, but we were working with essentially a preliminary geotechnical engineering study provided by Valero, and we felt that it was necessary for Valero to do a complete geotechnical study and incorporate whatever was found into the design to address any seismicity concerns. Hydrology and water quality impacts, while the project is covered under the existing Valero Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, or SWIP, to complete that and also to ensure that pollution would not reach Sulphur Springs Creek, we have a mitigation measure is provided to implement a stormwater mitigation plan to address best management practices and prohibit pollutants from reaching the creek. Finally, in transportation and traffic impacts, this is an area where there was obviously high city concern for the trains crossing the Park Avenue. Yes. And remember that Valero proposed to bring 2 trains into and out of the refinery on this crossing twice a day, so that the 2 trains would be, one train would occur between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m., 1 train in and 1 train out, and the other train would occur between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m., 1 train in and 1 train out. The nighttime, based on traffic engineering analysis, the nighttime window provided no problem. However, the daytime one was recognized as having several issues, that being the commute hours of 6 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. The project description indicates that train movements for this project would be avoided during that period of time. Through our analysis, we also determined that a mitigation measure limiting train movements between the hours of 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. to be also in effect during that day. And that's what I'll say about that. The other aspect in terms of traffic was emergency response, since clearly this train movement is going to take a period of time, although there are other train movements not related to this project occurring on a daily basis. The concern was raised about if an emergency arose where emergency responders needed to cross Park, we need to have a plan and coordination with Valero's existing emergency response facilities, as well as the cities, the city fire department, et cetera. So a mitigation is included with that to prepare an action plan to coordinate train movements with the fire department. With the implication of these mitigation measures, the initial study mitigated negative deck determined that the project itself was reduced to less than significant impacts. Amy?
Thank you. So just to summarize, tonight's presentation is to introduce the project, provide information on the process, and take public comment. There's been too much written comment documentation submitted to adequately respond at this meeting, and it's clear that there are many members of the public here which also wish to comment in person. So both the applicant and staff are recommending opening the public hearing, taking all comments, which will be recorded, and then continue the hearing to the next meeting of the Planning Commission, so that staff has time to adequately review, research, and provide written comment to the issues and questions that are raised. Consequently, we will not be answering any questions regarding the environmental review until the next meeting. In regard to the recommendation for continuance, the next regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting is on August 8th, The applicant has requested that the commission consider holding a special meeting on August 1st. Thank you.